And one thing I just want to preface this for anybody, and people will be listening to the recording maybe and hear the beginning of this, but we're going to be talking about the secular vote and the importance of it tonight, and it really is an important issue. And I think being secular and voting, everybody has a say. Like I mean, I know it sounds silly, like just everybody has a say, but like everybody's opinion on this to me matters. Like it's not necessarily whether you're an expert or you lean a certain way. It's just about what you think about the vote. And I'd like to hear a lot of opinions. Like I think maybe some people who we don't know, listeners who'd be interested. To me, it's the kind of thing where everybody can have some input because or I shouldn't say everybody, because most people do vote and pay at least a little bit of attention to the current climate of the country or whichever country they are in.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And we won't be taking any sides here. So just a disclaimer, we won't be promoting any candidates or, anything like that. So, but we do want to definitely address the secular vote and how that is growing. I think someone mentioned earlier today, and I forget who did it, but they posted with a comment on a book, The Rise of the Nuns, I think it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah, the nuns. Yeah.
Not the sacred nuns, but
No, nuns. Just to let you know, nuns is a standard kind of form used to describe anyone who is a non-denomination of a religion. Like it could be
yes,
atheist, agnostic, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. It's just grouping that together, which to me is the secular group.
exactly. Yeah. So it just kind of went right in line with tonight's discussion. Oh, Dale, let me know when our guest hops in. Is it going to be under the Yosib?
Yeah, he'll be under that account when he gets in.
Okay, great. So our
But
guest for tonight, from what I am learning from Infidel, because they are much more in communication with one another, that our guest has a lot to say on this topic, but isn't necessarily all that super active on Spaces and Twitter. So it's a really nice privilege to have him here today.
and it's funny because we were speaking about this earlier, but everybody uses, I guess, any platform you use differently. It's something different for all of us. And he's somebody I've had a lot of conversations with and loves coming to the spaces and has these talks. But you know how active I am on here. And for a lot of people, Twitter is a very side thing to their life where, when
Yeah,
it comes to this,
you're pretty much on here quite a lot, but
pretty
uh,
much quite a lot.
this is your platform.
Do you know how? Does anybody know how my fingers feel all day long? And I'm actually, I'm saying it like kind of like tongue in cheek, but like, yeah, no, I overdo it, but it's me.
Yeah, but it'll be better once you get your laptop in. It'll be like a lot better with the like
Oh,
typing
oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Oh,
I speak to text a lot, but I'm still doing it. You still have to scroll and. And speaking of, one of our guests is here.
yes, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Theosib. Is that pronounced correctly to the stage?
I mean, it's a made up name, but sure, that's how I pronounce it.
Well, my name is made up too. I am Zaylen, and I'll be on this
I,
Atheist account.
Infidel is actually my birth name.
That's a great name.
She was like, this one looks like a heathen. Hmm.
Yeah, I wish I would have gotten a heathen name, but I have a very biblical name.
Actually, I have ready for this. This is just a the time filler for a minute, but then we can get started if you'd like. But um, my name, my birth name. This is just another weird cultural like what the fuck. So my birth name was Ryan for the first 24 hours, and my middle name was Dale, and my father's parents. I don't know. Maybe it was a combination, but like grandparents, whatever. They thought that there could not be a Jewish boy named Ryan because that's an Irish name, and all I can think of when I hear that is Jewish and Irish aren't even fucking related. Like one's a religion and one. So, but to them, we're Jewish, so the kid can't be named Ryan. So they literally switched my birth certificate within the 24 hours from Ryan Dale to Dale Ryan. True story.
And Dale is Jewish name? I don't know that we're just.
Well, no, it's just that it's not Irish sounding. Like,
Oh,
you know what I mean? It was
oh,
more
that makes
neutral, I guess.
all the better.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know what it is. Again, it's xenophobia, racism, bigotry in some form. Clearly, if you're going to say a name is Irish, so he can't have it. But I never thought it. That's the first time I've told that on here.
Well, I have a biblical name too. It's Timothy.
Oh yeah, that's biblical.
Yes, it is. Well, welcome tonight, and thank you for offering the opportunity to hear you speak. And as we had mentioned a little bit earlier before, our topic for tonight is on the secular vote, or why the secular vote is important. And Infidel had extended the invitation to you to come up here and speak with us for a little bit tonight. So I would love to get to know a little bit more about you as well. And we'll maybe chat for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Does that sound good?
Sure, sounds
Okay,
good to me.
great.
So, I'm now. Dale asked me to join the show, but I have to admit I don't really have a lot of depth of knowledge when it comes to like politics and voting. So it might not be that helpful, but we'll give it a shot.
Well, to me, the reason that I did invite you, and I'll say this, preface, without kissing your butt too much, but I do appreciate your opinion on things, and the way you think about things. And to me, it's really not that important that someone is real. I shouldn't say that we shouldn't be educated, obviously. Of course, we should be educated on who we're voting for and why. But not that everybody has to have deep understanding of the political system to be able to be part of it. And that's kind of my thing, where it's like we can all range from last night if anybody knows, I was listening to a live podcast with Andrew Seidel, talking about these things. And so you have someone like him, if you don't know, who's more on the legal end of things, and knows all of that stuff. And the reason I was listening last night is because I know that I'm closer to you, where I don't have that vast knowledge of how the political system is, the inner workings of the political system. I know the fringes. So I think, it's important that we all have it's really, that's what voting is about, that we all have a say in this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I asked you to come on.
Okay. I mean, the main thing I can say is I think that the secular vote is important because they're secular people and that they should have a voice. But if you have a community that's heavily religious, and that's what they all want to be, then I'm also going to be in favor of them having their say, right? So I guess I would say that I'm in favor of the democratic process, whoever it is that's being represented.
Yeah, that's the point, right? It's not supposed to favor a group. It's supposed to be what you're about as a total group of people.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've seen I was looking up some statistics from a couple years ago, the secular vote has been growing in numbers, where we have more secular people, or people that are saying that they do not have a religion, are getting more involved in either activism or the process of voting, or maybe even considering running for political positions themselves.
Well, and I think one of the things we're seeing now with what we would call the secular vote, us, is that we're seeing a backlash from the far, I shouldn't just say far right, because they can go wherever they want, but from the religious vote swaying things to a point where it's changing laws, and that's scary. To me, I hope for, and I think it's natural to have a pendulum swing back. Like, you're going to take away women's rights, and you're going to take away my LGBTQ plus friends' rights, and you're going to make things harder for immigrants in this country, and you're going to blah blah blah. Well, okay, then us. When I say us, I just mean anyone who is pro humanity over deity, I guess is the best way I can say it, and puts people over country, just all people, is going to want a little fight back a little bit. So I feel like, obviously the political climate is really nasty all over the world right now, especially in America. But, well, not just America, Europe too, but all over the place. But I think what we're looking at right now is the swing back, like how powerful are quote unquote we. And when I say we, it just means the non religious right. Anybody who would be against them implementing their faith and beliefs as strongly as they have when they are a minority.
Yeah. So let's think about Texas for a minute. They have a very heavily right-wing state with very, small pockets of liberals. And one of the things that makes me sad about Texas is the fact that they have a bunch of creationists there who want to try to put creationism in the schools, which we can show is scientifically invalid. So where do you draw the line between letting somebody or an entire community, a state full of people with a particular viewpoint who believe something that we can show it's wrong, but whatever, they believe that. And so I would think that maybe they have some right to impose on themselves, not on other people, but on themselves, whatever mythology they want to have. Can we justify invading their territory and saying, well, because of what you're saying is scientifically wrong, you shouldn't vote in favor of that thing?
Well, yeah, that's where the difference between federal laws, and state laws come in. And unfortunately, I mean, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I agree with you. Like you said early on, like if these are your beliefs and well, that's the way you can and should vote. And if you win, I understand it. So to me, that's why I'm not saying that America shouldn't be turned. This sounds horrible for me saying this, but I'm going to say it shouldn't be turned into a theocracy. If that's what the majority of Americans genuinely want, they can have. I almost feel like you can have your thing. Like this state can be that, red states, blue states, but literally quarantine them off if that's what we're going for. But that's why we have federal laws, so to impose quote unquote human rights, which are just the basic. When I say that, like it's a vague term, but like the most basic of rights. That I mean, there's an agreement, and I forget what it's called, but UN agreement basically. It was pre-UN, but it's basically saying civil, our human rights that everybody is supposed to abide by. Every country, every state, every nation. It's like a bare minimum that Sharia has fought against for a while. And I just feel it's scary. That to me, it's just we're at a scary moment up against the threat of theocracy in the United States of America.
Yeah. So
do you think? Yeah, here's a good question. Do you think that is a serious thing, like the serious threat, or do you think I'm overblowing that?
It's hard to say. I mean, with the current Supreme Court, I worry about it. With some seriously extremist right-wingists in Congress and the Republican Party, it makes me worry about that. I mean, certain civil rights that we've taken for granted for a very long time have been taken away recently because the Supreme Court was stacked with people who basically lied about what their intentions were when they were seated as judges. Every single one of them said that they would not try to overturn Roe v. Wade, and yet they did. So I had another point I was going to make, but it'll come to me.
Yeah, no, and I was like, go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention, just from my own experience, I do live in Texas, and being an atheist here has been interesting. There is an atheist community here, and I think probably in the last year, maybe the past 2 years, our voices, our secular voices, have gotten a lot more outspoken, a lot more involved in what's going on in our excuse me, our local communities. I originally was part of one group, and now, just in the course of this year, there has already been like 3 additional secular/atheist groups formed specifically because of what is happening in our democracy. So we're definitely existing in Texas and would like to see things change, if not encourage more secular folks to get out there and vote, because I do hear it from some of the secular side saying, what's the point of voting? My voice is outnumbered. I can never defeat it. I'm kind of, it's just me in the corner. But I have seen where there is an opportunity for positive change.
It's funny as you say that. I'm hearing, and I like it. That it seems like secular people of all types are kind of looking for more community, looking for more of like minds, so they can be an understood group. But when you say that, you say, "Yeah, I kind of think I see this happening." I want to laugh and go, "Yeah, we're doing it too." We have one other speaker that may or may not be coming on. Somebody's actually feeling a little sick, so I'm just letting you know. But we can
Okay.
also, have anybody else, listeners, jump in as well later.
I wanted to interject a thought here because, as a minority in Texas, as a secularist in Texas, I wanted to bring up an example or examples of cases where we go out of our way to support a minority group. Okay, so an example would be ramps for the handicapped. The majority of people are not handicapped. So why do we put all this expense to help just this small group of people, right? And it's because we want every citizen to have equal opportunity. And we have minds that can do things, right? So just because somebody's body doesn't let them walk up the stairs doesn't mean they can't come and learn, make a contribution, and whatever, right? So a similar argument can be made for, let's say we have a community that's predominantly religious. It doesn't do the community any good to suppress or ignore the rights and needs of some subgroup that has some different perspective or need from the majority, right? So, black people are a minority. That doesn't mean that white people should stomp all over them, right? LGBTQ are a minority. So they nevertheless deserve basic human rights. And so I think this is something that we need to focus on in our society. Is there are certain things that a majority should be allowed to decide, but then there are certain limits that need to be placed on that for just universal human rights, that there are people who are not like you who you should not be oppressing or ignoring or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I completely agree, and that was a good example with the ramps and things of that nature. We do, and I think we should go go a little overboard, if you want to call it, to create equality. Sometimes creating equality or creating a certain level of equality, fairness, I guess I should say, creating a level of fairness for everyone involved does mean that some of us have to give up a little more if we naturally or just because of situationally have a little more. And that might be the people paying a little bit for the ramps, or giving up a parking space for it or whatever that is. I really think sacrifice, and it could be like the tiniest bit, is important if you have to sacrifice for community.
And there are reasonable sacrifices that we can make that don't really cause us trouble. It's not a big sacrifice to make ramps. It's not a big sacrifice for somebody who's conservative to say, you know what, those two guys, if they want to get married, they can, right? Because it doesn't change it doesn't change anything for me. It just lets them do something too.
But we need to, that's a big thing too, as far as if you're not infringing on others' rights by doing what you want to do, to me, there shouldn't be any argument from anyone, government included.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And, one of the things I do here, because, I am in a conservative area, religion is really a big part of the day to day here. I think a little differently than other atheists, but I do understand the right to have a religion, but I also would like, also to have the right to have the freedom from religion. And so that's kind of where I stand with things.
Well, that's one of the big topics that gets discussed a lot today, and there's a lot of very varying opinions on, of which I don't understand how there could be. The difference between separation of church and state and freedom of religion and freedom from religion. These, in some ways, can be described as little semantics, but a lot of times semantics do matter. And I was having somebody yesterday telling me this was a Christian nation built on Christian values. They went in this whole rant. But when you read the wordology, of how they were trying to create this nation. It was literally so, yes, like you said, you can be Christian, you can be Muslim, you can be whatever religion you want to be and practice that within, your rights so you're not invading under somebody else's. It's not about being non-religious. It's just about our religions being separate from our society. And that's what secular means. It doesn't mean you can't have religion. It means our rules are made for the common denominator, which is humanity, not the religion.
Right. And that's why the separation of church and state hopefully will continue to remain that way, because just like how it would affect our public schools and how our children are educated, just down to what we were just mentioning about using LGBTQ community being able to use the bathrooms, like that's an issue here, which is just just really sad.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to gender critical people talking about transgender. I don't want to derail the conversation onto the wrong topic, though.
No, because I mean, that's an issue that we're currently dealing with. It's part
Um,
of, yeah.
Oh yeah.
there are a lot of gender critical people that just seem like raging bigots. They will declare that a man can never become a woman or vice versa. Well, I don't know, maybe at a cellular level. Okay, but you can, most of what we deal with when it comes to sex related things are actually like psychological gender related things, like how you dress and how you behave. Those are actually cultural phenomena and psychological phenomena. So can a man, somebody born as a male, function as a woman? Sure. I don't, that's it. So we have these gender critical people who want to completely invalidate transgender entirely. And they're doing, and it doesn't even seem necessary for them to do that in order to achieve, and we'll kind of, I'll kind of like drift back onto the whole voting and democracy idea, okay, for them to have their objectives. So one of the things that a lot of gender critical people want is exclusivity in changing spaces and restrooms, okay? So they, in women's changing spaces, they don't want people with penises allowed in there. Now, I do think there's a certain amount of blame shifting. Like if there are men invading the space, that doesn't necessarily mean that trans women are doing that, right? So why are you blaming the wrong person? Why are you blaming somebody who superficially resembles somebody who's doing it, right? There's got to be some kind of poor thinking going on in your brain that's making you project onto the wrong person. But when it comes down to it, there are communities where there are votes going on where people are fighting over this, saying, look, we women want to have we've fought for decades and decades to have our civil rights, to have control over our spaces. And then along come transgender people who want to reverse all that. That's their perspective. I don't, necessarily know if I agree with all of that, but so we can put aside the raging bigots, and we can talk about people who, like, I've actually made friends among the gender critical community because they're like reasonable people who will consider other perspectives and it's like, and say, yeah, I understand, I don't want to exclude trans people, but I also think that there's a concern with invasion of private changing spaces. So and so we have a political issue here that somehow needs to be dealt with, and I don't know how to deal with this, but we have communities who can vote on these things.
Yeah, well, how we, unfortunately to me, and this, I always say this and it's circular, but how we deal with those things, like those gender issues, and a lot of that stuff is teaching our youth critical thinking skills. And unfortunately, that doesn't help this generation or this vote or next,
Mm-hmm.
but the answer is that we have future generations growing up who don't who understand enough to not put these put people in boxes and to vote against them and to treat them as lesser simply because of a lack of understanding. Like a lot of times, I always say this, a lot of times what we see as mean, or if you want to use the word evil or malicious, isn't really intended to be. It's a lack of understanding, And when people don't understand things, like whether it's somebody being black to a white person, or gay to a straight person, you see it all the time. When people don't understand things, they react in anger and violently and accusatory. But what that is it's fear of something they don't understand. Internally, deep down, it's, what is this? You're different. I don't understand, so I'm going to bark out loud at you and treat you differently. And
Hmm.
I feel like, and I'll say one more word. I don't mean to take up a lot of time here, but I attribute so often my, what I call humanity, being a humanist, caring more about people, individuals, people who aren't like me, people like we said, about people who need a little bit of help. The reason I credit what I credit for that is me educating myself a little bit when I got a little older, and so I wasn't a homophobe because I knew a little bit about biology and evolution. And I wasn't racist for the same reason, because I'm not going to hate somebody because their ancestors grew up closer to the equator. That's not mean. I mean, it is, but it's also just dumb. Like, I don't want to seem stupid and hating somebody because of where their ancestors grew up. That makes me look, dumb. And it's just not nice. So that happened with a lot of things where if you know something is genetic or uncontrollable, then why would you treat somebody as lesser? It doesn't make sense. It's not just mean, it's just not intelligent. Yeah, and side note, Doc, if you don't mind, we have one other guest speaker who I'd like to chime in for a little bit. But Jess, if you'd like to give a little introduction, if you can, for yourself. Jess works. Well, actually, go ahead and tell everybody what you do, because that is something as far as your knowledge on the inner workings of government to some extent.
And welcome. And actually, quickly before you start, I just want to mention Jess was one of our featured speakers a few weeks ago as well. So pleasure to have you back.
I'm so happy to be back with you guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you guys include me. So what Dale was saying was that I work in the local judiciary. Basically, I work for my county district attorney. I am in New York City. I handle the child abuse cases for the Special Victims Bureau of my local judiciary, my local DA. She is a Democrat. I live in a Democratic city. I live in a blue state, despite what the cesspool of upstate New York looks like. My state is Democratic, and the reason we are a blue state is because we are a wealth-producing state, because thanks to Alexander Hamilton, we have the banks of the world in New York. So that is definitely a major influence on the politics of New York. I will say, though we are a blue city, our Democrats are blue dog Democrats, and I would say my county DA is very much a blue dog Democrat themselves. I don't agree with every single one of their policies. I don't see value in some of the moderate policies that I've seen. Nobody knows who I work for, but I actually voted for my DA's progressive opponent because I didn't want another moderate blue dog Democrat in the judiciary in New York, but unfortunately, that's what they want. So that's what happened. I wanted to start by saying that if there were religion in what I do, we would never convict rapists or pedophiles. There would be no punishment for sexual predators or offenders because that type of stuff does run rampant in religious and conservative communities, and everybody hushes it up, and that's why you have generational trauma and all sorts of abuse going on. All of that being said, I am also heavily involved in local politics in New York. I am a member of 2 Democratic clubs. I only left the Working Families Party because New York has closed primaries and you have to be registered either a Democrat or a Republican to participate in primaries. And I want the chance to vote for as many secular and left and progressive politicians as I can possibly get. I just feel like my city should be leading by example, and in a lot of places, unfortunately, we are not. I've had a conversation with Dale wherein I expressed to him that ultimately this brush with fascism that the United States is experiencing is going to push us left. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily think that's true. But if you pay attention to Europe after World War II, what did they end up with? The national health in Britain. They ended up with better, more humanistic policies, Perhaps because, as well, Europe has dealt with the Christian fascist colonization of its landmass centuries before America did. And in addition, we were founded by religious fanatics that wanted to find a place to be fanatics. So they came to North America and they murdered all the Native Americans and said, "This is our home now." And then the Mormons sprang up, which is a particularly odious American feature. I don't know if everybody here is an American. I feel as though MAGA is an extension of Christian privilege, white privilege, and the privilege of being able to be completely undereducated and still survive in a place like America because the policies are liberal enough for that to take place. Unfortunately, it has soured. It has gone in the wrong direction for a lot of people who choose to be willfully ignorant. I really appreciate that I heard earlier in the talk some of you guys giving a pass to people being like they really don't know any better. I do not think that is true. By and large, particularly with adults, I feel as though that type of ignorance is willful, particularly in the age of information. You have no excuse in the year 2022 to be a transphobe, a homophobe, a nationalist, a zealot. There is no excuse for it. And I'm sorry to divert to the topic of transness for a moment, but one of the most disgusting things that I hear from the right, beyond their fallacious conflation of biological sex and gender expression and the spectrum that all of that lies on, and how they are so firmly entrenched in this Christian-centered, nuclear family, gender binary, prescribed and proscribed expression of what they feel is appropriately female or male. The fear, the manufactured hysteria that underpins all of this is the product that the GOP sells. It is the only product they have to sell. And part of the reason that their constituents are so incredibly susceptible to it is the church, particularly the evangelicals. And that is a result of privilege, because Jesus is the ultimate grift. No matter where you are in the world, no matter when you are in history post creation of Christianity, the church has always been the ultimate grift. And in America, in a capitalist system, where is that more prevalent but here? That's why we have people like Joel Osteen. That's how we ended up with that wild-eyed maniac Kenneth Copeland, who is just inexplicable.
When you say wild-eyed, it's weird because it's like he's trying to look like he's
Yes.
like he wants you to look like you're
Yeah,
scared of him. Yeah.
he's crazy.
Oh yeah, he's demon possessed or something.
No, he's the kind of guy that I laugh
Let's
at.
not call anybody demon possessed.
See, he's the kind of guy that I laugh at. If I were ever face to face with him, I probably wouldn't be able to not laugh. And not because I laugh when I'm nervous, but because I laugh at people who try way too hard for something that they know is fake. And make no mistake that all of these pastors know what they're doing is fake. They know it. And that's why this campaign of disinformation by the right is so very effective to religious people, and why pastors are such a very effective mouthpiece for them, because these people in the congregation are used to doing whatever they are told without question, because they listen to the pastor every week. And because a church is merely a business, any asshole can open a church. And that's why we have Creflo Dollar buying a fucking private jet. That's why we have Kenneth Copeland, again, that wild-eyed lunatic, saying he doesn't want to fly in a tube of demons.
And when you're talking about this, we should all keep in mind that these people are not paying taxes
That is correct.
as well when we're talking about
It is
government.
the most profitable scam in the history of mankind. It netted Europe islands and people and slaves and money beyond anything that we could imagine. You know,
So what? Wait. I have. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Zaylen. Were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add there, Jess, you were mentioning about how is it that we're in this age of information where we have access to so much, how they are keeping their congregations pretty much in the dark and keeping them isolated. And I agree with you that there is a large amount of that fear factor just pumped into their sermons, into their speeches, where they are just trying really hard to hold on to these old traditions or the Bible or whatnot, because they know that once people leave their congregation or step outside the church, there's just this mass amount of information that says otherwise.
How do you feel about super liberal Christians who their
I
churches are
mostly
on
feel
shoestring?
sorry for them.
Yeah,
I mostly feel sorry for liberal Christians.
I know of a local one. They have a trans woman in the choir. They are LGBT positive. They're in a shoestring budget because they spend all of their available money on helping the community. It's like they're basically humanists with a little bit of Jesus flavor thrown in.
Yep. And that's what I tell religious people all the time, that the parts of Christianity that they use to trick you into accepting the dogma is the humanism. And if it weren't possible for non-religious people to do good, there wouldn't be any secular charities. Right? So anytime a Christian tells you that by virtue of being a Christian, they are benefiting the world, they're a fucking liar. And it should tell you something. The church you're mentioning, Doc, is on a shoestring budget because they're actually doing what Jesus said. And when you do that, you don't profit. That's why the Mormon church is sitting on $100 billion.
Yep.
And Dr. Theo, just thinking on that, I've also, on occasion, run into a couple of atheists that are very conservative, and that always kind of throws me.
Well, yeah, because being an atheist doesn't mean you're smart. It just means the church couldn't fool you.
Who is that one scholar with the beard and stuff who was on a couple of? He was like a right-wing atheist. Oh, I can't remember his name.
Are you talking about Atheists for Liberty? Had him as a guest?
No. Well, so he was deplatformed by.
Is it David Silverman?
No.
Good.
No. So yeah, he was on Myth Vision, and then he said a bunch of stuff they didn't like, so they publicly regretted having him on. So of course Pine Creek decided that he was going to have him on because Doug likes controversy. So I can't remember his name. Anyway, so yeah, I mean,
we'll just say it was a man with a beard. He was a man.
Yeah.
He had a beard.
So yeah, it's interesting because he likes Trump, and
there is a group of atheists called Atheists for Liberty, and you should always know anytime you see the word liberty in a title, that's bad.
I would say that he was speaking of Ben Shapiro, but everybody knows that Ben Shapiro can't grow a beard.
No, everybody knows Ben Shapiro has to wish really hard for like the Fernando stash on his lip, like the shadow of a 13-year-old stash. And we also know...
I'm actually... Wait, let's behave ourselves. We're on OK Atheist Spaces, because I know the next place everybody goes when we talk Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to go there, too.
I know you were. That's why.
You know what's really...
Thank you, Dale.
You know what's the funniest thing I ever saw? Well, not the funniest thing, but it was really funny. Ben Shapiro had William Lane Craig on his show, and Craig was trying to convince Shapiro of the truth of Christianity, and Shapiro wasn't buying it, and it was
Hey, just quickly before we get too far off track, because I would love to keep going this route for fun, and we can another time or later. But when we're talking about this, I was thinking of something as I was listening to both of you talking. I do have a third guest speaker who I want to get in before we bring in anybody else who has any questions. So for right now, I will say, if the establishment bleeds, you are welcome to say hello, and if you have anything to add to the conversation. But the one sentence I do want to say before you do, is I should have said that first. The one sentence I'd like to say before you do is, as I'm hearing this and talking about how all these Christian religious organizations organize, that to me is something that we need to talk about, because while a lot of us say we don't want to be a group, we don't want to be an organization, because we don't want to be what we're against. If we want to fight it back politically, to me, I think in some way we do need to organize, and that's kind of important.
I disagree with you, but I'll say about it later.
Okay. And I just also want to add that even though we're saying, these the Christians or whatever religious people, maybe. I guess my point is that these people still go out at the end of the day and vote, which is why we're having this discussion. Why the secular vote is so very important.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll just start a little bit. So, folks here in America, we have this thing called American exceptionalism. You know, you have your gun-toting, big trucking, shooting all over the place, thinking we're all the best.
And I was just going to add real quickly too, and I know I do this a lot, but literally today, Lauren Boebert, or yesterday, did a little commercial thing saying that she was proud of American exceptionalism. Like they're saying it, poking their chest out.
Yeah, but she's a hooker that votes with fascists, so we're not really
Yeah,
worried
but
about what
it,
she
it doesn't.
thinks.
Well, but it doesn't matter because it's not her. It's the people who clap for her.
Yeah, no, totally. I hear you there, but just sort of just kind of like examining, we're thinking where the it is. But either way, where did that come from for a second? We as a nation, sure, there was some great things that we kicked off the world a couple hundred years ago when, our nation was born. Well, what we were, what we were one of the first was a secular government. It's funny. People actually don't like to bring that up or kind of really talk about that. For by the people and not really ruled and no requirements for any religious affiliation in any way. Also free speech, which also ties into this, but that's a huge thing. But essentially, you can either have America or a Christian / religious country, but you can't have both. That's what I think folks really need to realize. But direction of sort of religion. But then, if you want to just purely talk whether or not people say if they believe within a religion or any others, well, what about every other religion? Like I said, if you have your country saying, "Hey, we're becoming Christo-fascist," well, what if someone else has some other crazy religion? So essentially, just mathematically speaking, it makes sense if it is secular, not from a point of view that we want to be an atheist nation. I mean, that's again separate discussion.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that the major issue that we have in this. Yes, and I think the major issue we have in this country is the utter lack of civic knowledge, and that is completely on purpose. And I used to be a teacher before I went to criminal justice, and I taught everybody of all ages, preschool, 3K, all the way up to 12th grade. In my classroom, particularly for the first period class, we would say the pledge every morning, which, if you ask me, is grooming, but okay. Would say the pledge every morning, and on my wall in a very large poster was the original Pledge of Allegiance that did not contain the words "under God." Who noticed? Not one single person in my school noticed. Do you know why? Because the Pledge of Allegiance doesn't fucking matter. It's nationalism. It's nonsense. And when you are talking to people who have never taken a civics class, who have no interest in history, in urban studies, in any sort of context, in any sort of actual history except that which conforms to their comfort zone, you're going to end up with the Republican Party.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hear that in some other schools, what they do instead of just teach to a test, they do communal sort of critical problems that touch on multiple different subjects at once. So folks will say, or kids, I guess, get together and they try and solve a thing, and then they have to come up with multiple different things. And whether or not that's all that they teach, or at least there should be a realm of different courses that tap into those critical thinking skills collaboratively. But then also, yes, it's by design to not only just subjugate people, women, everything else, divide and conquer, but yeah, you don't, as George Carlin says, you don't want a nation of critical thinkers. You just want them just smart enough to run machines, but
that's
not.
kind of what, I'm sorry if it bleeds. That's kind of what we're fighting against. We're fighting to say, like, as you said, like, we the people, and that really is what it's about. Well, our level of knowledge, our level of understanding, our level of what's going on, and our critical thinking, our ability to be part of that and react to it is what makes the nation. So if we aren't that, we're going to have, and I'm just being really blunt here, but we're going to have a nation of MAGA Trumpers, uneducated, angry, being bigots, putting people into corners, and demanding their way. If we have a more educated populace, it's not like a yes or no, white or black. But if we have a better educated populace, things will gradually always be getting slightly better. That's all. I mean, it's not like it's things are fixed all of a sudden if we're all better critical thinkers, because people are still going to have their desires for greed and wealth and all of those things. But that's outside of mythology.
I think some conservatism comes from
because
laziness.
Absolutely.
There are my father-in-law, for example, is a sort of person who doesn't want to go out of his way to support someone who has celiac disease. So imagine, so he's the sort of person who wouldn't want to go out of the way to just learn what somebody's preferred pronoun is, because it just takes too much effort.
Yeah, that's a shame that little bit of effort, because I, coming from someone who, and I've said this on my own things, who has had to change the way I speak, the way I think, because I came from a life where the F word, and I say that meaning homosexual male, was the most common word I used, and now it makes my skin crawl to even attempt to say it, just to as an example, like I want to say F, call somebody that word, it hurts me. I did that. I learned to be that person, and I trained myself, and now I think I'm a better person for it. So, of course, it takes effort, but I'm sorry, fuck you if you can't put up a little bit of effort to make everybody else around you a little more
Totally.
comfortable.
This is why I don't give a shit about churches that are LGBTQ affirming. Fuck you. 0 points for basic common
me
human
too.
decency.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
You can have your feelings, but you can have your views, but making them vocal and making them vocal to a group where you're telling people to be against another group. Yeah, it's not okay. I don't
And
care
not
if
only
it's your
that,
religion
but
or
then
not.
getting up there and being like, look at us. We let them in here. Aren't we great?
Yeah, I've heard that
think
from a relative.
So evidently there was a graduating class from a Methodist seminary in Florida, and because some of the administration didn't want to graduate some of the members of that class because they were gay, okay, there was another person who said, screw you, if you're not going to graduate those people who did the work, and just because they happen to be gay, then we're not graduating anybody. I mean, that was somebody who actually stood up for people who were LGBT, right? Because they're like, I'm not going to stand for this prejudice, this discrimination that you're doing against a few of our students. I'm canceling the whole thing.
I mean, that would be
Send a
totally
message.
lovely if the institution at large didn't still hold the power and the ability to say, nope, we're not doing it. And that's the issue here, is that there are many Christians who will try and delegitimize accusations of homophobia and transphobia and pedophilia and all those things by saying, well, it doesn't happen in my church. And so the fuck what? And how do you know? Number two. And as far as I'm concerned, when your every week is just a marketing session for a bill of goods for a product that you never get to see, that you pay 10% of your income for, like, I would expect a little bit more for my money than some asshole in a dress or a suit every week on a stage massaging his own ego. Like, I don't, that's not what I'm going to pay my money for. That's a bad value to me. And it goes along with all of those same people who buy like the Trump coins and send their money to Donald Trump so that they can pay his legal fees, and none of it actually goes to any ending of election fraud or anything like that, because it's all a fucking grift. And the fact that religious people are so emotionally attached to their ideas that they will gladly engage in this pantomime every week And I don't know if any of the rest of you felt this, but I certainly felt as a child, no matter whether I was in my mother's church or my father's synagogue, that I was fucking pretending. And adults know they're pretending. And if you'll notice...
Well. Listen, real quickly. When you say in my, I don't want, I might get this backward, but when you say in my mother's church or my father's church,
Yeah,
or
that's right.
mother's okay, mother's church,
No,
father's
my mother's
synagogue.
church, father's synagogue.
Okay, I didn't mean to disrespect the religious.
No, who cares?
In my mother's church and in my father's synagogue, and then you say it wasn't adding up to me. Well, no fucking shit. Your
Well,
mother and your
yeah.
father believe in different religions.
Yeah, and but that's why but what I said was I was fucking pretending.
Yeah. I just want, hey Jess, real quick. I'm sorry because we are this conversation has kind of flowed, and everybody has gotten in, but I want to give our guests a chance to get in.
Before that, real quick, I wanted to thank Jess for coming on. She definitely had a lot more valuable things to say than I did. Also, I live in New York too, so.
Hey, are you in the city or are you upstate?
No, I'm in Binghamton.
Oh my God, dude, I just had a case out of Binghamton today. All right, that's what's up.
So anyway, thank you for coming on.
New York is such a small state.
Yeah, it's a tiny little thing, right?
You know, my mom lives 7 hours away from me, still in New York State.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Fucking nuts.
I listen, I'm in Pennsylvania and people always say like, oh, Pittsburgh. And I'm like, that's a different country. Like, yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to get going, but thank you for having me on.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to
Thank you,
stick
Doc.
around and answer any questions, or do you need to go?
Okay. I don't, if there are any questions, if on the unlikely event there are any questions specifically for me, maybe we could address those real quick, but I got to get going.
Sure. Well, at this point, I would like to open up the stage if anyone is a listener and has a question or a comment. I didn't really see anything in the DMs, so hopefully we're answering some of your questions or concerns. I know that the topic has kind of flowed a little bit back and forth between the secular vote and then other opinions, but that is the really nice thing about this evening is that we all have our different points of view, and I'm glad that our speakers tonight were able to share their views. So yeah, if you do have a question, we will bring you up to the stage. Otherwise, we can
Don't say stage. It sounds scary.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't want to like
No, I'm playing.
scare
I
anyone.
like stages.
Yeah. I didn't mean it sounds scary to me. Does anybody think I was afraid of a stage?
No, Dale is in fact a shameless whore. That is true.
It took me 4 years of teaching to get over my stage fright. I'm going to use that.
You know what? I want to say something now because I claim this line, and I want to be very clear about this, Jess. When you say that I am an attention whore, basically, I don't really love the word, but I would.
No, I don't mean that.
Oh, wait a minute. No, I want to be very clear. I am absolutely not an attention whore because I don't get paid for it. I'm an attention slut. Once I start getting paid, I will be a full force attention whore.
That is an excellent point. Well made, sir.
So, Dale, if I send you $10, does that change your status?
Yeah, no. No. Truthfully, I do love attention, but I also love articulation, and I think it's important that you don't call somebody a whore who's not technically a whore, and you shouldn't call somebody that as an insult.
But I don't like the other word, Dale. How do you know it wasn't a compliment?
Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be pedantic. What do I do with life? Does any of our guests want to grab a mic while we're sitting here playing around? If anybody would like to, honestly, still to talk about, because it is a serious subject, the secular vote. If anybody wants to get in on that. If not,
yeah, any poli-sci, any urban studies questions, I got you.
If you got any computer science questions, I got you.
If you guys want to know about weed, I got you.
And not necessarily to call anyone out here, but I see Will listening here, and thank you, Will, for listening in tonight. He is actually one of the activists here in Texas who has his own organization and has been just really strong voice here for candidates. So, hi, Will.
Hello, am I on the stage?
You are.
Spotlight. The spotlight's right on your face. You feel it?
That's fine. Thanks for doing this every week. I love the consistency. So real quick, like you all said, I am the state director for American Atheists in Texas, obviously. And
hell yeah!
And it's a really cool hat to wear. Also,
it sounded like we got a yee hat in there or something. Close.
Also, in the leadership of two secular groups here in Houston, the greater Houston area, and I formed my own side group, not my own, but I formed a side group called Secular Houston. We have a Twitter, write it down. We have a website, Facebook page, but with Secular Houston, it's a platform from which to do secular political activism and give secular politics of secular people a voice in politics. So I started it in December, and it's been a little bit more successful than I anticipated. We endorse candidates. Candidates know who we are at this point, or a lot of them do. And what I'm trying to do is just wrangle all the secular people in the greater Houston area and uh, have a voting block and give us some power in this chunk of Texas. And eventually, I want to upscale it to other cities in Texas. But for now, Houston is my focus. And so, if you plug in again, either Twitter, Facebook's probably the most interactive one, and our website's pretty slick. But you'll see who.
I was going to say, Will, if you want to share that with either myself or Zaylen, we can share that under our OK Atheist account, and people can follow you through there.
Okay.
I'm already on it.
Yeah. So just plug in. I know the elections are coming to an end, but this is a 3 to 6 election cycle plan. So you have to understand that any change is going to take time to foment. So, but this platform gives people a way to do the extra. So voting is basic. Voting is the least you can do. What I want you to do, what I ask people to do, is the extra. So voting plus, I call it. So I have a whole list of that, what that plus means. You can do stuff in the privacy of your own home. You can go door knocking, send candidates money. There's a whole list of things, and I've done the work. And I'll give you choices. We have also done the work with endorsing these candidates. They align with secular values, and our world would be better, in my opinion, if we get these people elected. And that plus, that energy, the extra, I'm trying to funnel into our endorsed candidates. And right now we have 15. Every year is going to be different, but that is what I am doing, Secular Houston.
Sounds much better than the Forward Party.
That is so embarrassing. That is so embarrassing. I'm so ashamed Andrew Yang is from New York.
Hey, Will, is your effort at all tied in with ACA, or has any involvement, or did it spin off from that? Just curious.
No, it's just it came from my mind grapes, and we're not a 501c4. We're not a PAC. I kind of didn't want to fuck with money or commit to that because kind of wisely I knew at least in the beginning I wouldn't. I need to have a board, at least 2 members, if not 4, and I just don't have the consistent help to form a board, and then throw money on top of that it'll just fuck things up and make things way more complex than it should be. So we're not a spin-off of anything. um, so yeah, that's to answer your question. But the AHA, American Humanist Association, they have a 50 a PAC or 501c4, I forget which one it is, called CFI. They're phenomenal. What I just described, they're doing, but on a national level, and their chairperson, their president, whatever, Ron Millar, he's phenomenal. He's terrific.
I'm just a side note, I'm actually a member of my local AHA.
Awesome.
And when I say member, I've for a little bit I was doing some stuff for them during the pandemic. That's when I first I started reaching out. I wouldn't say during the pandemic, right? We're still during it, but during what we most would consider the core pandemic, the first few 6 months or whatever. I started reaching out looking for like minds. Twitter was kind of one of those things I did, but then also I know I've only been on Twitter that long, but then also reaching out to them. And that was my first having some real in-person community. But again, it was during the pandemic, so we really couldn't do what we wanted to do. But that's different. And I guess just wanted to say that out loud because it really is like it's great to have these online communities, and I love what we can provide and how much we can get done. And there really is a lot here, especially for just getting the word out. But there's also something to be said for finding people in your local area that you can connect with if possible.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed with Will's group, Secular Houston, is that, for myself, being an atheist voter or secular voter, is actually having the opportunity through his organization that is able to reach out to candidates. He's put together several like meet and greets, and it actually helps to be able to open up to politicians to be able to ask questions from a secular point of view, and that's something that I personally felt was lacking in the Houston area. And not only that, but the website too brings together several secular communities into one spot. So I really appreciate what you've been doing, Will.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I extend that to everybody here who's doing and saying anything, even if it's just voting or just a tweet here or there. But Will, just specifically, thank you for the work you put in for the community. And I know it's not for one person, but I really do. I can't explain the sense of community I feel that I've never, and that's why Zaylen, that's like why we're doing this. Like Zaylen brought this OK Atheist idea up to me, and that's why so many people are doing things like this. I've never felt that feeling of, okay, these people want to do the right thing, what I consider the right thing, and so do I. Let's join forces. And I think a lot of people who've lacked religion have lacked that type of community. So, as much as I do agree, Jess, and I know we could talk about it another time, but as much as I do not want to say, yes, we're a group, I do feel there is a need to connect because it can bring out the best in people when, you come together in any form.
Yeah, I agree with you. My issue with political organizing is that in places where you are the majority, it comes off as unnecessary. Particularly where Will is, it is absolutely necessary to be doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I get it, but you're also looking at it from New York, and
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So my feeling is, I too have noticed that it is very hard for the atheist community at large, the secular community at large, to be anything cohesive, and the reason for that is that our viewpoint is the default, and so we don't have any unnecessary additions of religion, emotional attachment, all that nonsense that other places in the country and other groups of people have. So for us, we're like, yeah, of course we're going to vote for what benefits the greater good and not for a bunch of fucking Nazis. But because all these other people have these unnecessary appendages of religion and terror and ignorance and just fear and loathing and authoritarianism in them, it's why the Republican Party is so focused on creating chaos. It's why they're flooding the streets with guns. It's why they want to take away Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, because they want people to suffer and then say, I alone can fix it, when we know they can't.
Jess, when you say people are flooding the streets with guns and you're from New York, I have to just point out that I know previous knowledge from the music industry that every single person in the New York industry, in New York, period, has 100 guns and 100
Yes, that's confirmed. Yes, confirmed. I have 200 actually, because I work for the judiciary. Yes. Mm-hmm.
100 each from New York.
Well, that's for regular citizens. Yes, but
it sounds like a lot, but America.
I mean, we need it. I mean, what are we going to do? It's New York. It's the most dangerous place in the world, right? And another thing that I think is necessary to point out is that,
by the way, don't take a bite of the Big Apple. The last time somebody did that, it started a whole bunch of shit.
Yeah, I recommend that. Not taking a bite, Amy. There is a massive amount of fear that goes into. In fact, fear is the impetus of all conservative policies. They have nothing else to offer their voters, but for their voters, fear is all they need, because fear is all they know. And because they view education as a thing to be applied by force, because they themselves were not educated, they were indoctrinated, and it was called education. They view education as being taught what to think instead of how to think, which is another reason they have such a huge problem with college. And for the average dumbass, they're not going to make the effort to go to college and improve their lives. They're going to blame everybody else. Look, listen, a college degree is not necessary for success. What's necessary for success is humility and a work ethic. And
but I'm not humble either.
Yeah, you are.
Everything is against me.
Dale, oh my God, I'm gonna tell you what I used to tell my students. I'm gonna cover you in chocolate and sell you to Dylan's candy bar for being silly.
I like the first part. Yeah.
Well, I know this. I mean, the second part is the point of the first part. Gets you out of my hair. You know what I'm saying? It's funny to tell a first grader you're going to sell them to a candy store because it's not a threat. Even
They
though,
feel like they're going to Willy Wonka's.
yeah, no, totally, they're fine. Violet Beauregard yourself. Enjoy.
Although that didn't work out well for most of them.
We are inoculated as secular people against that existential fear that religious people are subjected to. And that's why conservative propaganda doesn't work on us.
So separately, I wanted to bring up just real quick the topic of education, and I happen to be talking to some few folks randomly at bars and other places, and they say, "Oh well, I don't," when I say that we should. Education being like, let's say K through 16 being provided free, they're like, oh, I don't want to be paying for someone's college education, even though it's really easy to completely change the entire, college system. So it just becomes a simple federal run program, kind of just like normal school. But, at the same time, he's all, oh, well, but I got the streets need to be better, and, the city needs to be planned better, all these different things. And then it's kind of like, well, people need to get educated so that they can actually do these jobs and
How
do
do
these
we do
other
things
things
properly without the education, without the core education?
Without the core education, you're actually relying on a populace and
And I want to just be real quick when I say core education, I don't mean common core. I just mean root.
Oh, common core.
I just wanted to be clear. I wasn't advocating for that. I was just saying the root of education, a foundation to build off of educationally.
Well, this is, I think, something that made teaching something I could really only do within the city, because I grew up in a place where I was not the majority, and I don't know what it's like to live in a place where white people are the majority, and I'm totally fine with that, because the fact of the matter is that people are just people, and the manufactured hysteria of the white supremacists on the right is nothing more than manufactured hysteria. There is what white people fail to understand is that by default they have always been represented in the media in a positive light. By default, they have always had the upper hand in terms of social obligations.
What you just started to describe is what people call white privilege.
That's right.
And what people hear and get angry. And I'm going to say this just because it's a good topic for 1 second. I was the type of person who would get angry at that term just over a decade ago, and I tell you this, honestly and humbly. But I really no. But I'm being honest, because I do think you should take your lumps, for who you are, for the truth.
Who you were, Dale. Who you were.
Correct. Who I was, and part of my journey getting here was having to shake that, and I understand that position because I was in it, and I know I wasn't a bad person. I just didn't know. I wasn't educated enough.
It wasn't that you were a bad person. It was that you were indoctrinated with fear, and you cannot overcome a fear until you confront it, which is why, as a kid, I didn't understand why the fuck everybody was afraid. Excuse my language. I'm so sorry. I'm angry about this. I didn't understand why everybody was afraid of somebody who wasn't white.
Well, I wanted to also just last thing I bring up here before Absolute Talks is when it comes to majorities and the secular vote. Well, no other thing should be brought up that's probably more important. And I guess I saw that in anywhere from 2030 to 2070, well, the default majority position will be non-religious or atheist. And so it's really interesting as we start to transition into that world. How things will start changing. And obviously, you can maybe say that the right is this last breath hope for them to try and change things. But they've been at this for 50 years. We're on the winning side. But, it's just going to take time.
Well, I always say, just to add to what you just said, I mean, I'm just describing it in different words. What we're seeing from the far right and that Christian nationalist movement is like what would be a dog backed into a corner. Like they know they're in trouble. They're fearful. So instead of having logical, rational arguments and trying to work things out, their fangs are out and they're foaming at the mouth. And that's what we're seeing from all of this. You're a pedophile. You're going to hell. All that crap. That's their mouths foaming and their last attempt at, okay, we can't beat you any other way. We're going to bark and bite. And
this is the death throes of the Republican Party. Yes.
And we just can't let it happen. That's all. Like you said, that's a good way to describe it. We're watching their death throes, and that's why it seems so scary.
I want to give absolutely no one a chance to ask his question. Hi, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm good. Am I the only one who thinks that a large part of the education is? All right, here's my crazy theory. I feel like the very, very rich use the religious right and a couple other splinter groups like the NRA to basically push through tax reforms. All I feel like Trump did, his major legislation was cutting taxes for the rich.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So I feel like that the really rich, they're not too worried about healthcare. They can afford it. They're not too worried about the deficit. It really won't affect them. They're not too worried about the overwhelming cost of education because they can afford it. Not only are they not against it, they're actually, I think they're for it because it gives their kids a leg up on so many more. I mean, who was the one guy who married Trump's daughter? You found out his dad spent $2 million to get him into Harvard.
Oh, that dead-eyed idiot, Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner, yeah. It took me a second to think of his name, which I'm happy about.
Well, I confuse him with Stephen Miller. Sometimes I refer to Stephen Miller as a dead-eyed Nazi. So, same type of human suit.
Yeah, I unfortunately know exactly what you're describing when you say that. It's like Edgar looking for sugar water.
He puts on a mask or a suit when really underneath the suit is his Nazi suit every day.
Zaylen, did you want to wrap things up, or how did you want to? Yeah.
I think maybe so, because we don't really have any other questions.
I do. I'm sorry. I have one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the thing that I was raised to fundamentalist Christians, and we've talked about this. I feel like if every non-Christian on the earth dropped, Christians would just find a way to fight amongst each other. I've got ex-Muslim friends who say the same thing about the Muslim communities, about the dogma that always becomes like a pure dogma and no Scotsman fallacy, or the other things where they're vicious. And historically, if you look at through history, the most dangerous people to Christians have not been atheists. It's not been us. We're not the ones who kill them because they have the wrong view of the Trinity. That's been the Calvinists or the Catholics killing the Protestants, or vice versa. So, I mean, how do we market ourselves to the theists by letting them know, look, we may not agree with you, but we feel like a basically a non-denominational thing is the best for everyone, because do you really want one Christian group trying to destroy another Christian group? Does that make sense?
Well, you'd have a hard time convincing them of the actual possibility of that, even though none of them can agree with each other. They will tell you that by virtue of being Christians, they are automatically more important to you, more important than you, more moral than you.
Until they're not dealing with us, and then you're right. They're fighting amongst each other, because
right. They're already
fighting
amongst
vicious.
each other.
Yeah. They're vicious. They just group together when it's time to vote.
I mean, I think it's hilarious to watch them argue over which version of the fairy tale is true. Who cares?
I've heard, and I'll say this might be my last line. I have heard at evangelical Pentecostal who speaks in tongues and lays hands talk horribly about Catholics because they are so ridiculously stupid because they think the cracker turns into Jesus. And I'm like,
and yet the Pentecostal is too stupid to understand that the ecstatic emotional experiences that the church provides them for every week is what they are actually addicted to, and that's what they come back for every week. And guess what? They're stupid enough to pay for the privilege.
Oh, that's pure adrenaline hormones that running through you. I mean, that right there. That's just a kick that I'm sure they're feeling the DMT that I have to pay for.
Well, you have all the different Christians going after each other, and you know what the atheist says? He goes, just pass the blunt, right? I mean, this is the difference there.
That is so funny you should mention that, because I'm about less than halfway through mine.
Interesting that you brought up the Pentecostals, because as I keep pointing out, I was raised that way, and yes, we did feel like the Pope was the Antichrist, and we thought he was the demon in Revelation. We did. We felt he was the demon that was talked about in Revelations. But we also felt Baptists were horrible people because they believed in something called eternal security, where if you were saved, you could go to heaven, and we didn't. So we felt that Baptists led people astray. We might have friends that are Baptists, but we despised them secretly.
It's a quick skit, but I'm sure a few people have seen it. It's a Family Guy skit where Brian and Stewie, or not Brian and Stewie, I guess they were going back and forth in time, and there was two people talking to each other. One was some type of Christian, and one was the Seventh-day Adventist, and they listed all the things they believe, and they were all the same. And the last thing was, we go to church on Saturdays, and he goes, we go to church on Sundays, and he went, what? And it's like he did the cartoon thing, and his head turns, and he looks at him like, you're the craziest thing I've ever heard of. because you go on a different day of the week, but like everything else was the same.
I love what you said about eternal security. I came up with my own term, soul insurance. So I totally get you there. But yeah, once I realized and started, understanding the fallacies, with in between evolution and the flood and all that other stuff. The Pascal wagers is cool and all, but once you realize you could go to hell in every other religion, as well as how you're living your life, instead you could just pass the blunt.
Yeah, and I was going to say
Amen.
this is another way of saying pass the blunt with what you just said. But I don't need soul insurance. I need soul insurance the same way I need insurance for my Bentley. Like I don't have that shit, so why the fuck? Why do I need insurance? It really is. It's less of a and I mean this sincerely, like less of a burden on you when you don't think you need to protect something that you may not really have. That's
Well,
it's a
that's
lot.
like
That's a lot of effort, not
rapture
sure.
pet insurance. Like, sure, I'll take your dog when the rapture happens. No problem, dumbass. Pay me $50 a month.
I just saw something. It said that the rapture, it probably just happened, and like no one noticed because no one
Zero
was good
people.
enough to go.
Nobody made it. I actually tweeted that out, just like joking around maybe a week or two ago. But it's funny because the truth is, probably next to nobody would go. And when I say next to, if you're talking old school biblical rules, nobody would go. But the people who kind of would, according to some of those rules, are the jihadists who've already killed themselves. Like, unfortunately, they would make it there, as crazy as that sounds, according to their books. Um, yeah, it could happen, and we would never know if it were real. But it can't happen, so I shouldn't have said that.
Well, since my whole family's Pentecostal, when I die, and I've had to go to all their weddings and all their funerals and hear all their sermons, when I die, I want the first person to say, "Looks like John survived the rapture," or me.
I remember when my grandmother died.
Everybody else went.
Yeah, no, when my grandmother died, she died a very devout Catholic. She was part of the same cult as Amy Coney Barrett. So I have a lot of experience with people of praise, and I used to get taken to underground churches and shit in Manhattan when I was a kid. It was very scary. They're just very scary people.
Yeah.
She left an envelope. And in that envelope was $8,760. And guess where she wanted that money to go? Nobody?
I thought it was rhetorical. Go ahead.
To Jesus, of course. Guess where that money went?
Muhammad.
My pocket.
That's
Because
not
fuck Jesus. He doesn't need my fucking money. No, My grandmother,
No, I know.
her whole life, tried to convert me and told my mother that because she'd married a Jewish man and had children with him, that we weren't going to go to heaven.
Oh, yeah. So I'm
And
glad you got that.
I mean, look, I laughed in her face her whole life when she tried to convert me, but she still dragged me to those fucking churches. And imagine being 7 years old down in the basement of some building on the Upper East Side where people are laying hands on your head. Like, I hadn't even made my first communion yet.
Jeff,
Totally.
that's I think I saw a family member of mine do it for the first time ever 4 months ago, and that was scary to me. I went, "Whoa, this is real!" Like when you see it, like in real live time, and those people either believe it or think they believe it, or tricking themselves to believe it. It's kind of scary. Like
Yeah, it's horrifying.
there's and it's weird to you that people could watch that and go, "No, that's not a cult." I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and Indiana Jones? The heart's still in the chest. It's pretty much the same thing.
Mm.
Everybody's screaming Kali Mas and bouncing up and down. It's scary.
Yep. Well, guys, I think that this is probably going to be a good time to wrap things up here. I greatly appreciate everyone who's had the opportunity to speak with us tonight. Thank you all for your time. This has just been another reason why it's just so important for us to just come together and chat from time to time and hopefully just see different points of view. And that's one of the points one of the reasons why we have this. So really appreciate everyone coming up here today. If you are not already following Infidel, please follow him. I am Zaylen at Zaylen99, and of course the OK Atheist page as well. And please follow the speakers as well. I know Will dropped down as a speaker, but please follow him as well. And his organization is still growing and could use your support. So again, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and On that note, Dale, did you want to say anything else tonight?
I just wanted to add a quick disclaimer. Thank you for that. But I just wanted to say anybody who isn't following me and does decide to, the quick disclaimer is that the views of Infidel do not necessarily reflect the views of OK Atheists, and he takes no responsibility for his thoughts and or words going against anything that is said in here. Be careful. Check me out first. If you like the stuff, then say hi. I'm a little articulately barbed. But other than that, thank you everybody very, very much. Greatly appreciate it. As you know, Zaylen said, it's always great just talking, and that's why we do these things. So thank you to our guests, and thank you to the speakers and listeners, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Until then, vote if you're voting. Do what you can do. Be part of this and just spread the message. Even just being here, you're doing something. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you for listening, and thank you all for voting. Take care. Good night.